The Galactic Council had been watching the third planet of the Sol system for exactly 347 standard cycles. From their observation posts scattered across the asteroid belt, the various species that made up the Council maintained a careful vigil over the world they had designated as Terra 3. The planet's dominant species, which called themselves humans, had recently achieved faster-than-light communication and were on the verge of developing interstellar travel. According to Galactic Law 447b, this meant they were eligible for first contact protocols. Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian fleet adjusted his four eyes to focus on the holographic display before him. His elongated skull, typical of his species, housed a brain that had evolved for strategic thinking over millions of years. The Zephyrians were considered among the most logical and methodical species in the galaxy, which made them perfect for military operations. Their bone-white skin and tall, thin frames gave them an almost ethereal appearance, but their tactical prowess was legendary. "Report on the human military capabilities," Kethvar commanded, his voice a low whistle through the breathing slits on his neck. Commander Vextai, a shorter Zephyrian with the distinctive scarring of a veteran officer, manipulated the hologram with his long, delicate fingers. "Our analysis indicates a primitive but surprisingly aggressive species, Admiral. They maintain multiple competing military forces across their planet, suggesting a lack of unified command structure. Their weapons are crude by our standards, primarily chemical explosives and projectile-based systems." The Admiral nodded slowly. This was typical of species just emerging into the galactic community. Most civilizations went through a similar phase of planetary conflict before achieving unity and reaching for the stars. What concerned him more were the psychological profiles their xenobiologists had compiled. "What about their behavioral patterns?" he asked. Vextai's expression grew troubled, his normally steady hands trembling slightly as he accessed the next set of data. "This is where the situation becomes unusual, Admiral. Our behavioral analysis teams have identified patterns that don't match any known species profile in our databases." The hologram shifted to show surveillance footage of various human activities. Kethvar watched with growing confusion as the images displayed humans engaging in what appeared to be self-destructive behavior. Groups of humans deliberately threw themselves from elevated platforms while attached to elastic cords. Others voluntarily entered enclosed spaces with massive predatory animals. Most disturbing of all, some humans appeared to be deliberately injuring themselves while sliding down steep inclines on small platforms. "Explain this footage," the Admiral demanded. "Our xenobiologists are calling it recreational activity, Admiral," Vextai replied, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. "Apparently these humans engage in deliberately dangerous activities for what they term entertainment or fun. Our psychological experts are baffled. No known sapient species voluntarily exposes itself to mortal danger for pleasure." Kethvar studied the images more carefully. In one clip, a human had attached fabric wings to his body and launched himself from a cliff face, plummeting toward certain death before the wings somehow caught the wind currents. The human's face, visible through monitoring equipment, showed not terror, but what their analysts had identified as joy. "Are we certain this isn't some form of ritual punishment or military training?" the Admiral asked. "Negative, Admiral. Our cultural analysis indicates these activities are voluntary and popular among the general population. They even pay currency to participate in what they call extreme sports. We've identified over 300 distinct categories of these activities, ranging from controlled falling to deliberate exposure to dangerous wildlife." The Admiral's four eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep concentration among his species. In all his years of military service, spanning contacts with 47 different sapient species, he had never encountered anything like this. The closest parallel was the berserker rage of the Korthak warriors, but even they only exhibited such behavior in combat situations, not as leisure activity. "What are the recommendations of the Contact Committee?" he asked. Vextai's scarred face grew even more troubled. "The committee is divided, Admiral. Xenobiologist Nethara believes these humans may be suffering from a species-wide psychological disorder. She recommends immediate intervention to provide medical assistance before they drive themselves extinct. However, military analyst Dorvac argues that any species capable of such reckless behavior might prove unpredictable and dangerous as adversaries." The Admiral considered this carefully. The Galactic Council had protocols for dealing with aggressive species, and they had methods for handling those suffering from psychological disorders. But they had no precedent for a species that seemed to actively seek danger for entertainment. Have we attempted to understand the logic behind these activities? Kethvar asked. Our teams have analyzed thousands of hours of their communication networks, Vextai replied. The humans appear to derive satisfaction from what they call adrenaline rushes and pushing their limits. They speak of feeling alive when engaged in these dangerous activities. Some even claim it helps them appreciate their normal, safer lives more fully. The concept was so alien to Zephyrian thinking that Kethvar's brain struggled to process it. Zephyrians, like most galactic species, had evolved sophisticated risk assessment capabilities precisely to avoid unnecessary danger. The idea of deliberately seeking it out seemed like a fundamental flaw in their evolutionary programming. Show me more examples, the Admiral commanded. The hologram shifted again, displaying a bewildering array of human activities. Groups of humans gathered in large structures to watch other humans violently compete in various forms of combat. They engaged in activities that seemed designed to test the limits of their cardiovascular systems, deliberately pushing their bodies beyond safe parameters. Most shocking of all, they had developed vehicles designed specifically to travel at lethal speeds, then used them for entertainment rather than transportation. In one particularly disturbing clip, a human was suspended over a deep canyon, held only by a thin cable, while hundreds of other humans watched and cheered. The suspended human's vital signs, monitored by their equipment, showed extreme physiological stress, yet his facial expressions indicated pleasure and excitement. Admiral, Vextai said quietly, there's something else. Our monitoring has detected that these activities are becoming more elaborate and dangerous over time. It's as if they constantly need to increase the level of risk to achieve the same level of satisfaction. This revelation sent a chill through Kethvar's rational mind. A species that not only sought danger but required ever-increasing levels of it was unprecedented in galactic history. It suggested a fundamental difference in brain chemistry that could have far-reaching implications for any contact scenario. What about their military forces? The Admiral asked. Do they exhibit the same tendencies? That's perhaps the most disturbing aspect, Admiral, Vextai replied. Yes, their military personnel engage in these activities at even higher rates than their civilian population. They call it training, but our analysis suggests it serves no practical military purpose. They seem to use danger itself as a form of conditioning. The Admiral accessed his personal files and reviewed the standard first contact protocols. The procedures assumed a rational species that valued self-preservation above all else. These humans seem to violate every basic assumption about sapient behavior. Have we detected any similar patterns in their historical records? He asked. Vextai nodded grimly. Their entire recorded history is filled with examples of individuals deliberately placing themselves in mortal danger for various reasons. They have legends and stories celebrating such behavior. Our cultural analysts believe this tendency is deeply embedded in their species' psychology. The implications were staggering. Every other species the Council had encountered viewed courage as the ability to face necessary dangers, not the seeking of unnecessary ones. The humans seem to have developed an entirely different relationship with risk and mortality. Admiral, Vextai continued, there's one more thing. Our communications specialists have been monitoring their entertainment media. They create fictional stories about individuals who engage in even more extreme dangerous behavior than what they actually do. It's as if their reality isn't dangerous enough for their imaginations. Kethvar felt his logical mind struggling to comprehend this information. The humans not only sought real danger, but fantasized about even greater dangers. It was like discovering a species that had evolved backwards, becoming less concerned with survival rather than more. What is the current recommendation of the Fleet Command? The Admiral asked. Fleet Command has requested additional observation time, Vextai replied. They want to understand whether this behavior represents an evolutionary phase that the humans will grow out of, or a permanent characteristic of their species. The decision about first contact has been postponed indefinitely. The Admiral nodded slowly. He could understand the Fleet Command's caution. Making contact with a species this unpredictable could have consequences that their strategic planning couldn't account for. If humans responded to first contact with the same thrill-seeking behavior they exhibited in other areas, the results could be catastrophic for everyone involved. Continue monitoring, Kethvar commanded. I want detailed psychological profiles of their leadership structures. If we're going to make contact with these humans, we need to understand how their risk-seeking behavior might influence their decision-making in a first contact scenario. As Vextai began implementing the new orders, Admiral Kethvar remained staring at the holographic display. The images of humans deliberately exposing themselves to danger continued cycling through various examples. Each one seemed more incomprehensible than the last. One image showed humans who had traveled to the most extreme environments on their planet, not for resources or territorial expansion, but simply to experience the challenge. They climbed massive rock formations that offered no strategic value, crossed frozen wastelands that contained no resources, and descended into deep ocean trenches that served no practical purpose. Another series of images showed humans engaging in group activities that seemed designed to test their species' limits. They organized events where thousands of individuals would run vast distances until their bodies began shutting down from exhaustion, then celebrated those who pushed themselves the farthest. Perhaps most disturbing was their treatment of their own young. Rather than protecting their offspring from all possible dangers, humans deliberately exposed them to controlled risks as part of their development process. They called it character building, and seemed to believe that facing danger made their children stronger and more capable. The Admiral's 4 eyes focused on a particularly puzzling image. A group of human parents were watching their young offspring slide down a steep, slippery incline at high speed, with only a thin barrier preventing them from serious injury. The parents' expressions showed not concern but enjoyment, and they were making encouraging sounds as their children engaged in this dangerous activity. "Vextai," the Admiral called out, "do we have any data on human child-rearing practices?" "Yes, Admiral," came the reply. "Their approach to offspring development is unlike any species we've studied. They systematically expose their young to increasingly challenging situations as they mature. They call it preparing them for the real world, but our analysis suggests they're actually conditioning them to seek out rather than avoid dangerous situations." This revelation added another layer of complexity to the situation. It wasn't just that individual humans sought danger. Their entire species was systematically training each new generation to do the same. It suggested that this behavior was not just psychological, but deeply cultural and possibly even genetic. The Admiral called up the files on human physical capabilities. The data showed that humans were actually quite fragile compared to most sapient species. Their bodies could be easily damaged, they had limited natural defenses, and their recovery time from injuries was lengthy. Yet despite these vulnerabilities, they consistently chose to engage in activities that exploited these weaknesses. "It's almost as if they're testing their own mortality on a regular basis," the Admiral muttered to himself. This thought led him to review the human medical data. Surprisingly, their medical technology was quite advanced for their level of development. They had sophisticated systems for treating trauma, repairing damage, and extending life. It was as if they had developed superior medical capabilities specifically to support their dangerous lifestyle choices. The Admiral was beginning to form a troubling hypothesis. What if the humans' risk-seeking behavior wasn't a flaw in their psychological development, but actually an evolutionary advantage? What if their willingness to face danger had driven them to develop faster, adapt quicker, and advance more rapidly than species that avoided risk? He called up comparative data on technological development across different species. The results were disturbing. Humans had achieved their current level of technology in a fraction of the time it had taken other species. Their rapid advancement seemed to correlate directly with their willingness to attempt dangerous and uncertain endeavors. "Vextai," the Admiral called out again, "analyze the correlation between human risk-taking behavior and their rate of technological advancement." Several minutes passed before Vextai responded, and his voice carried a note of concern. "Admiral, the correlation is statistically significant. Species that exhibit higher levels of risk tolerance tend to develop technology faster, but humans are an extreme outlier. Their risk tolerance is off our measurement scales, and their advancement rate is correspondingly accelerated." The implications of this analysis were profound. If humans continued advancing at their current rate, they would achieve technological parity with the Galactic Council within a few centuries rather than the millennia typically required. And they would do so while maintaining their apparently insatiable appetite for danger and challenge. Admiral Kethvar realized that the Galactic Council was facing a completely unprecedented situation. They were dealing with a species that might be more dangerous precisely because they had no fear of danger itself. The standard diplomatic and military protocols that had worked for thousands of years might be completely inadequate for dealing with humans. As he contemplated the situation, new footage appeared on the holographic display. A group of humans had constructed a massive artificial structure for the sole purpose of launching themselves through the air at incredible speeds. They called it a roller coaster, and humans were voluntarily subjecting themselves to forces that would be considered torture by most species. The most disturbing aspect was that they were laughing while experiencing what should have been terror. The Admiral made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Rather than recommending immediate contact or continued observation, he was going to request something unprecedented: a joint task force including military, scientific, and diplomatic specialists from every council species. If they were going to make contact with humanity, they needed to completely rethink their understanding of what it meant to be a sapient species. The humans had already changed everything just by existing. Soon, the galaxy would discover just how much more they would change once they reached the stars. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the massive crystalline chamber aboard the neutral station orbiting the red giant Kellax 7. Representatives from all 47 member species had gathered, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, harmonics, and electromagnetic pulses that the universal translators worked overtime to convert into coherent dialogue. Admiral Kethvar stood before the assembled delegates, his white form dwarfed by the sheer diversity of alien life surrounding him. To his left, the massive Gorvanian delegate resembled a living mountain of stone and crystal, while to his right, the gossamer thin ethereals floated in their containment fields like living clouds of luminescent gas. Each species had evolved on different worlds under different conditions, yet they all shared one fundamental trait: a logical approach to survival and risk management. All except the humans. Chancellor Mordeth, the ancient crystalline being who had presided over the council for over 2,000 years, resonated with a low harmonic that commanded attention. Admiral Kethvar, your report states that humanity represents an unprecedented threat to galactic stability. This is a serious accusation. Present your evidence. The Admiral activated the central holographic projector, and the chamber filled with images of human activities that had been compiled over the past standard year. The assembled delegates observed in growing bewilderment as scenes of human recreational behavior played before them. Honored delegates, Kethvar began, what you are witnessing challenges every assumption we have made about sapient behavior. These humans do not merely tolerate danger, they actively seek it for pleasure. The first sequence showed humans strapping themselves to massive elastic cords and diving from towering structures. The Gorvanian delegate's rocky form shifted with what passed for confusion among his species. Explain the tactical advantage of this behavior, he rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. There is none, Admiral Kethvar replied. This activity, which they call bungee jumping, serves no purpose other than the experience of falling towards certain death and being saved at the last moment. They pay currency to participate in this. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. The concept of paying to experience near death was so fundamentally alien that many delegates required their translators to repeat the statement multiple times. The hologram shifted to show humans deliberately placing themselves in enclosed spaces with large predatory animals. The Vorthan delegate, whose species had evolved as prey animals on their homeworld, began emitting high-frequency distress calls. This is aberrant behavior, she chittered rapidly. No rational being exposes itself to predators voluntarily. Yet humans do this regularly, the Admiral continued. They call it cage diving with sharks. They enter the territory of apex predators while protected only by metal barriers, then describe the experience as thrilling and unforgettable. The next series of images showed humans racing vehicles at speeds that would be fatal in case of collision. The rational collective, a hive-mind species that prized logic above all else, spoke in unison. We calculate a 73% probability of serious injury or death from this activity. Why do they not calculate the same risk? Our analysis suggests they do calculate the risk, Admiral Kethvar replied. But rather than deterring them, the risk appears to be precisely what attracts them to the activity. The higher the calculated danger, the more desirable the activity becomes. This statement created what could only be described as chaos in the chamber. Delegates began communicating frantically in their native languages, their translation systems overwhelmed by the simultaneous conversations. The concept of deliberately seeking danger was so contrary to every evolutionary instinct that many species couldn't process the information. Chancellor Mordith's harmonic grew deeper, calling for order. "Admiral, are you suggesting that humans have evolved a death wish?" "No, Chancellor. Our xenobiologists believe the opposite. Humans appear to have evolved an extremely strong survival instinct, but coupled with an equally strong drive to test that instinct. They seem to derive pleasure from surviving dangerous situations that they have deliberately created." The Admiral advanced to the next set of data. This behavior extends beyond individual recreation. Observe their approach to exploration and discovery. The hologram now showed human space missions, deep ocean expeditions, and polar explorations. Unlike other species, who sent automated probes or robotic units into dangerous environments, humans consistently chose to personally experience these risks. Their space program, the Admiral explained, involves strapping themselves to controlled explosions and riding them into the vacuum of space. When their early space vehicles experienced catastrophic failures resulting in death, rather than abandoning the program, they improved the technology and sent more humans into space. The cautious ones, a species that had taken 3,000 years to develop space flight due to their extreme risk aversion, spoke through their crystalline communication matrix. "This is evolutionary suicide. They should have ceased such activities after the first casualties." "That's what our models predicted," Admiral Kethvar agreed. "However, human behavior consistently defies these predictions. Each failure seems to strengthen their resolve rather than deter them. They commemorate their failures and honor those who died attempting dangerous endeavors." The next sequence of images proved even more disturbing to the assembled delegates. It showed humans engaging in organized combat sports, deliberately striking each other in controlled environments while crowds of other humans watched and cheered. The pacifist coalition, whose species had eliminated all forms of violence from their society millennia ago, recoiled in horror. They engage in ritualized combat for entertainment. This suggests a fundamentally violent nature. "Our analysis indicates otherwise," the Admiral replied. "These combat sports have extensive rules designed to minimize serious injury. Paradoxically, humans seem to enjoy controlled violence while simultaneously working to reduce actual harm. They have created ways to experience danger and aggression safely." This concept proved particularly difficult for many delegates to understand. The idea of safe danger seemed like a logical contradiction. Several species requested that the translation systems verify the accuracy of the concept. Dr. Nethara, the Zephyrian xenobiologist, stepped forward to address the assembly. Her voice carried the careful precision of a scientist struggling to explain the inexplicable. "Honored delegates, our research has revealed that humans have developed what appears to be a unique neurochemical reward system. They produce naturally occurring chemicals in response to stress and danger that create pleasurable sensations." The Scientific Consortium, a coalition of research-focused species, immediately requested clarification. "Define the mechanism of this reward system." "When humans face perceived danger, their bodies release compounds they call adrenaline and endorphins," Dr. Nethara explained. "These chemicals enhance physical performance and create positive emotional states. Essentially, their biology rewards them for surviving dangerous situations." The implications of this revelation rippled through the chamber. A species that was biochemically programmed to enjoy danger represented something entirely outside their understanding of evolutionary development. "This suggests," continued Dr. Nethara, "that humans may have evolved in an environment so consistently dangerous that risk-taking behavior became advantageous rather than detrimental. Their planet's history shows evidence of frequent natural disasters, climate changes, and ecological upheavals that would have eliminated more cautious species. The stable Worlds Alliance, whose member species had evolved on remarkably peaceful planets, struggled to comprehend this concept. Are you suggesting that chaos and danger improved their evolutionary fitness? That appears to be exactly what happened, the xenobiologist confirmed. Humans who were willing to take risks to find new food sources, shelter, or territories during catastrophic events were more likely to survive and reproduce. Over millions of years, this selected for increasingly bold behavior. Admiral Kethvar returned to the presentation. This evolutionary history has created a species that not only tolerates uncertainty, but thrives in it. Our strategic analysis suggests that humans would respond to first contact not with caution, but with excitement. The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated this possibility. First contact protocols assumed that new species would be overwhelmed by the revelation of galactic civilization, requiring careful management to prevent social collapse. A species that would be excited by such a revelation would require completely different handling. "Show them the military data," Chancellor Mordeth commanded. The hologram shifted to display human military activities. The assembled delegates watched in growing amazement as human soldiers engaged in training exercises that seemed designed to simulate the worst possible combat scenarios. Human military forces, the Admiral explained, deliberately expose their personnel to extreme physical and psychological stress during training. They call this preparing for the worst-case scenario and seem to believe that experiencing controlled trauma makes their soldiers more effective. The images showed humans parachuting from aircraft, conducting operations in hostile environments, and engaging in combat simulations with live ammunition. Most shocking to the observers was that humans volunteered for these positions and took pride in completing the most dangerous training. Their special forces, Admiral Kethvar continued, actively seek out the most dangerous assignments. They compete with each other to participate in missions that other species would consider suicide missions. The Hive Collective, whose military doctrine emphasized overwhelming numerical superiority and minimal risk to individual units, found this approach incomprehensible. This is inefficient allocation of personnel resources. Trained soldiers are valuable assets that should be preserved. Humans seem to believe that soldiers become more valuable precisely because they have survived dangerous training and missions, the Admiral replied. They actively promote individuals who have demonstrated a willingness to face extreme risks. The presentation continued with examples of human emergency response teams who voluntarily entered collapsing structures, fought massive fires, and rescued people from natural disasters. These individuals were celebrated in human society and often became inspirational figures for others to emulate. Most disturbing, Dr. Nethara added, is their approach to scientific research. Human scientists regularly expose themselves to dangerous conditions to gather data. They study active volcanoes from close range, enter storm systems in aircraft, and test experimental technologies on themselves. The research collective was particularly troubled by this revelation. Scientific advancement requires careful preservation of accumulated knowledge and experienced researchers. Exposing scientists to unnecessary risks is counterproductive. Yet human scientific advancement has been remarkably rapid, the xenobiologist countered. Their willingness to take research risks has led to breakthroughs that more cautious approaches might have missed. They seem to generate innovation through controlled recklessness. The final section of the presentation showed human cultural productions, their entertainment media, literature, and art. Almost without exception, these works celebrated individuals who faced overwhelming odds, took extraordinary risks, and achieved seemingly impossible goals. Their entire cultural identity, Admiral Kethvar concluded, revolves around the concept of overcoming challenges through courage and determination. They don't just tolerate risk, they worship it. The chamber erupted in cacophonous discussion as delegates struggled to process this information. The concept of a species that had culturally elevated risk-taking to a virtue was unprecedented in galactic history. Chancellor Mordeth's harmonic finally restored order. Admiral Kethvar, what are your strategic recommendations regarding first contact with humanity? The Admiral's 4 eyes focused intently on the Chancellor. Honored Chancellor, I believe we are facing a paradigm shift that will reshape galactic civilization. If we make contact with humans, we must be prepared for them to reject the careful, measured approach that has maintained galactic stability for millennia. Explain your reasoning. Humans will not be content to gradually integrate into galactic society over the course of centuries, the Admiral continued. Their psychological profile suggests they will want to immediately explore every dangerous region of space, attempt to contact every hostile species, and push the boundaries of every technology they encounter. The implications of this assessment sent waves of concern through the Assembly. Galactic civilization had been built on careful expansion, measured contact, and gradual technological development. A species that rejected these principles could destabilize everything. Furthermore, Admiral Kethvar added, humans may inspire similar behavior in other species. Their approach to life could be psychologically contagious, encouraging others to abandon the cautious practices that have served us well. The diplomatic corps raised immediate concerns. Are you recommending that we avoid contact entirely? No, the Admiral replied, surprising many delegates. I believe contact is inevitable. Human technological development is accelerating. They will achieve interstellar travel within the next few centuries with or without our intervention. The question is whether we prepare for their arrival or allow them to surprise us. Dr. Nethara stepped forward again. I propose a radical alternative. Instead of trying to change human behavior to fit our expectations, perhaps we should study how their approach might benefit galactic civilization. This suggestion created another wave of shocked responses. The idea that established galactic culture might learn from a primitive species was almost as revolutionary as the humans themselves. Consider, the xenobiologist continued, that human risk-taking has produced remarkable results in relatively short time periods. Our careful approaches have created stable civilizations, but perhaps at the cost of stagnation. When was the last time any council species made a truly revolutionary breakthrough? Chancellor Mordith's harmonic grew thoughtful. You suggest that our caution has become a limitation. I suggest that diversity of approaches strengthens the whole, Dr. Nethara replied. Humans may represent an evolutionary solution to challenges we haven't yet recognized we face. The debate that followed would continue for days, but the seed of a revolutionary idea had been planted. Perhaps the humans weren't a threat to galactic civilization, but an opportunity to evolve it. Perhaps their seemingly insane approach to life contained wisdom that older, more cautious species had forgotten. As the session concluded, Admiral Kethvar realized that humanity had already changed the galaxy simply by existing. Soon, they would discover just how much more change was coming. 3 months after the emergency council session, the Joint Task Force arrived at the edge of the Sol system. The fleet consisted of ships from 12 different species, each contributing their unique expertise to humanity's first contact. Admiral Kethvar commanded the operation from his flagship, but the real decision-making power rested with the cultural integration specialist, Dr. Yelnara of the Emphatic Collective. Dr. Yelnara belonged to a species that had evolved specifically to understand and adapt to other cultures. Her people were natural diplomats, capable of shifting their behavioral patterns to match those of species they encountered. If anyone could successfully navigate first contact with humans, it would be her. The plan they had developed was unlike any previous first contact protocol. Instead of the traditional approach of revealing themselves to human governments and working through official channels, they had decided to observe human recreational activities firsthand. If they were going to understand humanity's relationship with danger, they needed to witness it directly. The task force had selected what humans called the Extreme Sports International Festival, taking place in the mountains of what the humans designated as Switzerland. Thousands of humans from around their planet had gathered to participate in and observe activities that pushed the boundaries of physical possibility and safety. Dr. Yelnara adjusted her species' natural camouflage abilities to approximate human appearance, though she retained her slightly larger cranium and additional sensory organs. The other observers had used various technological aids to blend in with the human crowd. Their mission was simple: understand how humans could find pleasure in what every other species would consider torture. As they materialized at the festival grounds using personal transport devices, the sensory assault was immediate. The air vibrated with what humans called music, rhythmic sound patterns played at volumes that would damage the hearing of most species. Humans appeared to enjoy this auditory assault, moving their bodies in synchronization with the sounds and producing positive vocalizations. The first event they witnessed was something humans called wingsuit flying. Groups of humans had attached fabric wings to their bodies and were launching themselves from helicopter platforms thousands of meters above the ground. They plummeted toward the Earth at speeds that would ensure instant death upon impact, then deployed parachutes at the last possible moment. Commander Vextai, who had insisted on joining the away team despite Dr. Yelnara's objections, watched in horror as human after human threw themselves from the aircraft. "This cannot be recreational behavior," he whispered through his species communication device. "They must be prisoners being executed." Dr. Yelnara checked her translation equipment and confirmed the readings. "No, Commander. The biometric scans indicate extreme pleasure responses. Their brain chemistry shows the same patterns we would associate with their most enjoyable experiences." To prove her point, she directed their attention to the humans who had successfully landed. Rather than showing relief at having survived, they were displaying what her cultural database identified as euphoria. They embraced each other, made celebratory noises, and immediately began planning their next jump. The team moved through the festival, documenting each activity and the human responses. They observed free climbing, where humans scaled vertical rock faces using only their hands and feet, with no safety equipment to prevent a fatal fall. The participants' vital signs showed levels of stress that would incapacitate most species, yet they continued climbing with expressions of intense concentration and joy. At the base jumping area, humans were leaping from fixed platforms with parachutes, but the altitude was so low that they had only seconds to deploy their emergency devices before hitting the ground. Dr. Yelnara watched as a human's parachute failed to open properly, resulting in a hard landing that would have killed most aliens. The human stood up, brushed himself off, and commented that it was the best rush he'd had all day. The Zephyrian military observers were particularly disturbed by an event called free solo rock climbing, where humans climbed massive cliff faces without any safety equipment whatsoever. A single mistake would result in certain death, yet the climbers appeared to be in a state of meditative calm rather than terror. "Dr. Yelnara," Commander Vextai said, his voice tight with confusion, "these humans are demonstrating precision and skill levels that rival our best special forces operatives, but they're doing it purely for pleasure. How is this possible?" The emphatic specialist consulted her readings. "The neurochemical data suggests that the danger itself enhances their performance. The stress response seems to improve their focus and physical capabilities rather than degrading them." This observation led them to the most disturbing discovery of the day. Not only were humans unimpaired by danger, they actually performed better under extreme stress than in safe conditions. It was as if their entire physiology had been designed to thrive in life-threatening situations. The festival's centerpiece was an event called proximity flying, where humans in wingsuits flew through narrow canyons at high speed, passing within meters of rocky outcroppings that would instantly kill them if contacted. The observers watched in amazement as human after human navigated these deadly obstacle courses with precision that defied belief. "Look at their faces," Dr. Yelnara instructed her team. "Notice the expressions." The humans engaging in proximity flying weren't showing the grim determination that most species would display when forced into survival situations. Instead, they appeared to be experiencing something approaching ecstasy. Their biometric readings indicated a state of consciousness that human researchers called flow, a condition where time perception altered and performance reached peak levels. The alien observers began to realize they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. These humans hadn't just evolved to survive danger, they had evolved to excel in it. The more extreme the challenge, the more capable they became. As the day progressed, they witnessed even more bewildering activities. Humans deliberately entered freezing water and attempted to remain conscious while their body temperatures dropped to near-lethal levels. They called this polar plunging and treated it as an invigorating social activity rather than a survival test. Others participated in extreme endurance events, where they pushed their bodies beyond normal operating parameters for hours or even days. Rather than viewing this as punishment, They spoke of achieving personal breakthroughs and discovering their limits. The most shocking observation came when they witnessed humans helping each other engage in even more dangerous activities. Rather than attempting to dissuade their companions from taking risks, humans actively encouraged and supported each other's dangerous pursuits. They had developed entire social structures around shared risk-taking. Dr. Yelnara realized that human society wasn't just tolerating individual risk-taking behavior, it was actively promoting and celebrating it. Parents brought their offspring to watch these activities. Educational institutions offered classes in dangerous sports. Their media systems glorified individuals who pushed boundaries and achieved seemingly impossible goals. "Commander," Dr. Yelnara said to Vextai, "I need to speak with some of these humans directly. We need to understand their psychological motivation." Using her species' empathic abilities, she approached a human who had just completed a particularly dangerous cliff jump. The individual's name, she learned, was Marcus, and he had been participating in extreme sports for most of his adult life. "Marcus," she said, using her translation equipment to convert her words into human speech patterns, "can you explain why you enjoy these activities?" The human's face lit up with enthusiasm. "Oh, you're interested in base jumping? It's incredible. There's nothing like the feeling of stepping off a cliff and trusting everything to work perfectly. The fear, the adrenaline, the moment when the chute opens. It's like being completely alive for the first time." Dr. Yelnara's empathic sensors detected no deception or mental instability. This human genuinely derived profound satisfaction from deliberately placing himself in mortal danger. But surely you could achieve satisfaction from safer activities. Marcus considered this seriously before responding. "I've tried regular sports, meditation, even virtual reality simulations. Nothing comes close to the real thing. When you're falling through the air with nothing but skill and equipment standing between you and death, every sensation becomes incredibly sharp. Colors are brighter, time moves differently, and you feel connected to something larger than yourself." The emphatic specialist realized she was hearing the closest thing to a religious experience that humans might have. They weren't just seeking danger, they were seeking transcendence through danger. Their relationship with risk was spiritual rather than practical. "Have you ever been seriously injured?" she asked. "Several times," Marcus replied cheerfully. "Broken bones, torn muscles. One time I was in the hospital for 3 weeks after a particularly bad landing. But that's part of it, you know. The risk has to be real or it doesn't work. Safe danger isn't really danger at all." This response confirmed Dr. Yelnara's growing hypothesis about human psychology. They required authentic risk to achieve their desired mental states. Simulated or minimized danger wouldn't provide the neurochemical rewards they sought. She spent the next several hours interviewing dozens of humans, and the pattern remained consistent. These individuals weren't aberrant members of their species. They were expressing a fundamental aspect of human nature in its purest form. They spoke of feeling most human when facing their fears, of discovering their true selves through extreme challenges. As the festival concluded, and the alien observers prepared to return to their ships, Dr. Yelnara compiled her preliminary report. What she had witnessed challenged every assumption about sapient behavior that had guided galactic civilization for millennia. "Admiral Kethvar," she transmitted to the fleet command, "I recommend immediate revision of all first contact protocols. Humans don't just tolerate uncertainty and danger, they require it for optimal psychological and physiological functioning." The response from the Admiral came quickly. "Explain your assessment, Doctor." "Humans appear to have evolved a unique relationship with stress and challenge," she reported. "What we interpret as life-threatening danger, they experience as optimal living conditions. Their performance, creativity, and satisfaction all increase proportionally with the level of risk they face." She paused before delivering the most significant part of her assessment. "Admiral, I believe humans may be the solution to a problem we didn't realize we had. Galactic civilization has become so focused on safety and stability that we've eliminated the very conditions that drive innovation and growth. Are you suggesting we abandon our successful stability-based model?" "I'm suggesting we learn from humans how to maintain dynamic stability rather than static stability," Dr. Yelnara replied. "They've discovered how to thrive in uncertainty while still maintaining social cohesion and technological advancement." The implications of her report rippled through the Joint Task Force. Species that had built their civilizations on risk avoidance were being asked to consider that risk engagement might be superior. As they prepared for the next phase of contact, Admiral Kethvar realized that the humans had already begun changing galactic civilization. Simply by existing and demonstrating an alternative approach to life, they were forcing other species to question fundamental assumptions about survival and progress. The final phase of first contact would determine whether this change would be gradual evolution or revolutionary transformation. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. 3 days later, humanity received its first official communication from the Galactic Council. The message was delivered not to world leaders or scientists, but to the organizers of extreme sports events around the planet. The aliens had realized that to understand humanity, they needed to speak with the humans who most fully expressed their species' essential nature. The response from humanity was everything the aliens had predicted and feared. Rather than being overwhelmed by the revelation of galactic civilization, humans were immediately excited by the possibilities. Their first questions weren't about technology or philosophy, but about what new challenges and adventures the galaxy might offer. Within hours, human extreme sports enthusiasts were proposing expeditions to alien worlds, competitions between species with different physical capabilities, and collaborative projects to develop entirely new forms of recreational danger. The Galactic Council had spent centuries carefully managing first contact to prevent cultural shock and social disruption. The humans had turned first contact into a party invitation and were already planning how to make it more exciting. As Admiral Kethvar watched the enthusiastic human response to galactic contact, he realized that his species and all the others in the Council were about to learn what it truly meant to be alive. The humans weren't just joining galactic civilization. They were going to revolutionize it by teaching everyone else how to embrace the unknown with joy rather than fear. The age of careful, measured galactic expansion was ending. The age of human-inspired adventure was about to begin, and none of the established species were prepared for how dramatically their lives were about to change. For better or worse, the galaxy was about to become a much more exciting place to live. The aliens who had spent so much time observing human recreational activities were about to discover that they had only seen the beginning of what humans considered fun.